Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Friday, May 19th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our day by getting into the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. I couldn't find any international observances for May 19th, but on this day in the year 1992, the U.S. government ratified the 27th Amendment to the Constitution. The 27th Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits any law that increases or decreases the salary of members of Congress from taking effect until after the next election of the House of Representatives has occurred. It is the most recently adopted amendment, but was actually one of the first to be proposed. The idea behind this amendment is to reduce corruption in the legislative branch by requiring an election before a congressperson's salary increase takes effect. The public can thus remove members of Congress from office before their salaries increase. Unfortunately, it's unclear if the amendment produced any change in congressional behavior. So this morning, what I'm going to chat with you about is something that happened at my residence last night. Basically, I was made aware of what I perceived to be an upsetting injustice that happened to my son at school. And I'm not going to go into details for what I hope are obvious reasons, but basically, this was something that enraged me as like a mother, it brought out that protective instinct, and it was really hard to deal with on like a regular weeknight because, if I had been made aware of this, like during the daytime, in the morning, I probably just would have marched straight down to the school and, started, I guess, raising hell, or whatever you want to say. Like, I'm obviously not a very reactive person. I don't think of myself as having a temper or being like combative. I'm very reserved. By nature, I'm very thoughtful, but I'm also a mother, and I think as a parent, there is this sort of, obviously, we all know this, it's a biological imperative to protect your offspring, right? So when I heard about this injustice, I became extremely angry in a very uncomfortable way because there was nothing for me to do, basically. There was nothing productive for me to do in the moment. And what made it even more frustrating is that my son did not agree that there had really been an injustice, or, when I learned of it, it was sort of old news, old information. And, I asked him, like, why didn't you tell me about this before? And he says, well, he said he didn't think it was that big of a deal. And even after he spoke with me, and even though I did try to remain fairly stoic in my response, I know that he knew that I was upset and that I thought it was a big deal, but he didn't really seem to revise his own opinion. So he remained stoic about it. Which I guess, I wasn't, that almost was even more upsetting because I thought to myself, like, why isn't he enraged? Why isn't he upset? Why doesn't he have the same emotional response that I do? And even though my nature is to analyze that kind of thing, I was too upset to think clearly, so that just made the whole situation that much worse. But I think that this experience of just learning upsetting, information about a perceived injustice to my son on a weeknight when, there was essentially nothing I could do at that point that was productive. I think it was a good ultimately a good learning experience, or at least a microcosm for a bigger lesson. And that is essentially going to be the theme of what I talked to you about this morning. For our feel-good moment, I am going to crack open a book that I haven't read from on this show yet, and I'm a little unsure how to talk about it because I don't know whether YouTube is listening to me and will shadow ban me or something if I say the title, but I don't know. I'm just going to say it because YouTube can take it up with the book publisher. I don't know. The book is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it's by Mark Manson. As I was writing my notes for this episode this morning, I thought of a section in this book called Pain is Part of the Process. I'm going to skip over the first part of this section because it's pretty gruesome, but Mark Manson writes about a Polish psychologist named Dabrowski who found that a sizable percentage of World War II survivors believed their wartime experiences had made them better people. Now, he doesn't state this phrase outright, but I believe Mark Manson is referring to post-traumatic growth with this case study. I think that is what Dabrowski found with these survivors. And coincidentally, I recently wrote a blog post about post-traumatic growth, and if you're interested, I will put that link in the description. So when I remembered the section in this book, I wasn't really thinking about anything super traumatizing, but I believe the lesson here can be applied to any range of upsetting situations. So Mark writes, "For many of us, our proudest achievements come in the face of the greatest adversity. Our pain often makes us stronger, more resilient, more grounded. Many cancer survivors, for example, report feeling stronger and more grateful after winning their battle to survive. Many military personnel report a mental resilience gained from withstanding the dangerous environments of being in a war zone." Dabrowski argued that fear and anxiety and sadness are not necessarily always undesirable or unhelpful states of mind. Rather, they are often representative of the necessary pain of psychological growth. And to deny that pain is to deny our own potential. Just as one must suffer physical pain to build stronger bone and muscle, one must suffer emotional pain to develop greater emotional resilience, a stronger sense of self, increased compassion, and a generally happier life. Our most radical changes in perspective often happen at the tail end of our worst moments. It's only when we feel intense pain that we're willing to look at our values and question why they seem to be failing us. We need some sort of existential crisis to take an objective look at how we've been deriving meaning in our life, and then consider changing course. You could call it hitting bottom or having an existential crisis. I prefer to call it weathering the shitstorm. Choose what suits you. And perhaps you're in that kind of place right now. Perhaps you're coming out of the most significant challenge of your life and are bewildered because everything you previously thought to be true and normal and good has turned out to be the opposite. That's good. That's the beginning. I can't stress this enough, but pain is part of the process. It's important to feel it because if you just chase after highs to cover up the pain, if you continue to indulge in entitlement and delusional positive thinking, if you continue to overindulge in various substances or activities, then you'll never generate the requisite motivation to actually change. So, as I said, I'm not really speaking about like an existential crisis or hitting rock bottom or anything super traumatic this morning. I'm just trying to talk about your average upsetting event. But I think that even a minorly or moderately upsetting event is an opportunity for growth. And I really love the analogy in this section, which is actually what I thought of this morning, of, comparing the physical pain of building muscle to the emotional pain of developing a stronger sense of self. So with that in mind, we are going to turn our attention to deep work by Cal Newport for our learning moment today. This is in a section called A Neurological Argument for Depth. And here, Cal Newport is building his argument for why deep work is valuable by sharing the story of Winifred Gallagher with us and what she learned from her own upsetting situation. The science writer Winifred Gallagher stumbled onto a connection between attention and happiness after an unexpected and terrifying event, a cancer diagnosis. Not just cancer, she clarifies, but a particularly nasty, fairly advanced kind. As Gallagher recalls in her 2009 book Wrapped, as she walked away from the hospital after the diagnosis, she formed a sudden and strong intuition. This disease wanted to monopolize my attention, but as much as possible, I would focus on my life instead. The cancer treatment that followed was exhausting and terrible, but Gallagher couldn't help noticing, in the corner of her brain honed by a career in nonfiction writing, that her commitment to focus on what was good in her life, such as movies, walks, and a 6:30 martini, worked surprisingly well. Her life during this period should have been mired in fear and pity, but it was instead, she noted, quite often pleasant. Her curiosity piqued. Gallagher set out to better understand the role that attention, that is, what we choose to focus on and what we choose to ignore, plays in defining the quality of our life. After 5 years of science reporting, she came away convinced that she was witness to a grand unified theory of the mind. Quote, like fingers pointing to the moon, other diverse disciplines from anthropology to education, behavioral economics to family counseling, similarly suggest that the skillful management of attention is the sine qua non of the good life and the key to improving virtually every aspect of your experience. This concept upends the way most people think about their subjective experience of life. We tend to place a lot of emphasis on our circumstances, assuming that what happens to us, or fails to happen, determines how we feel. From this perspective, the small-scale details of how you spend your day aren't that important, because what matters are the large-scale outcomes, such as whether or not you get a promotion or move to that nicer apartment. According to Gallagher, decades of research contradict this understanding. Our brains instead construct our worldview based on what we pay attention to. If you focus on a cancer diagnosis, you and your life become unhappy and dark. But if you focus instead on an evening martini, you and your life become more pleasant, even though the circumstances in both scenarios are the same. As Gallagher summarizes, who you are, what you think, feel, and do, what you love, is the sum of what you focus on. Now, if you follow me on Instagram, you may have noticed that I actually posted about this very case study, sharing many quotes from this section last night. I actually generally prepare these posts in the middle of my day and schedule them for the evening because most of my audience is 6 or 7 hours after me, and I try not to post in the middle of their night. But at the time that I was struggling with my upsetting event yesterday evening, I had already prepared a post on this very topic, hours earlier, probably at least 4, 5, 6 hours earlier in the day. So I had already prepared this post on the topic of diverting your attention to the good things in life, and it was soon to be published on my Instagram. So I didn't really think of this post at first. Initially I became extremely angry and upset. I spoke with my husband and he became equally upset, and I realized there was nothing productive about working ourselves up at 8:30 p.m. on a weekday. I remembered my Instagram post. I realized that I could spend my evening ranting and raving, plotting retribution, busting out a series of angry emails, or I could spend some quality time with the sweet child I wanted so desperately to protect. I'm not going to lie to you. I wasn't able to make the transition immediately, but I can tell you what I did that actually worked surprisingly well. And this is true. I'm just being honest. This is really what I did. I locked myself in my home office in this very room. I put on my angry music and I busted out as many push-ups as I could, of as many types of push-ups I could think of. And when my arms were too floppy to do anything else, I turned off the music, left my office, and sat with my son in bed, snuggling our dog and speculating on what was going through our dog's mind. Trying hilariously, as we so often do, to translate her facial expressions into words. Now, I'm not saying that I am not going to do anything about this upsetting situation with my son. I definitely am. But I'm not going to do anything from a place of heightened emotion because I think that would be counterproductive. And I'm definitely not going to let this event steal a single evening of quality time with my son from me. So, to get your mind in focus mode, I want you to think about where you place your attention. Do you generally place a lot of emphasis on the big events in life, like getting a promotion or a client or a bigger apartment? And how much emphasis do you place on the good things, the little sweet moments that are so easy to overlook? I'd highly recommend setting the intention to let these little moments grow a little larger in your mind. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again on Monday.